I've been working hard on The Wicker Devil for the past 3 months or so, and what I like to do when I'm starting to feel some burnout from game development is to take a few days away from developing that game and fill that time doing stuff that I love. So I spent the next few days developing a video game, specifically a VR game, which I had never done before. Also, making these little projects gives me extra content to share with you guys, so everybody wins. Except you. It was originally going to start out as a 24-hour challenge video like I've done before, but unfortunately, this time around, it didn't really work out that way. I've loved VR ever since the very first Oculus Rift came out and gave little old Shawkat motion sickness so bad I was throwing up within the first 5 minutes of playing the Tuscany demo. But now, over 10 years later, I now get to love the masterpieces that have come out since, such as The Walking Dead VR, Half-Life Alyx, and Marvel Studios' Spider-Man Far From Home virtual reality experience. And with VR constantly improving over a period spanning 60 years, I now don't get motion sick at all, as long as I'm playing for less than 30 minutes. Also, why did we make the decision to stop making VR headsets look like this? This design was so peak, even Sega couldn't handle it. So here's the idea. I only have a few days to get this done before I have to get back to working on The Wicker Devil. So, like always, everything is written down and planned beforehand. You run a small boba shop. Customers place their order, which consists of a type of drink, the size, the type of toppings, and the amount of scoops. You must make their drinks accurately and quickly to receive positive feedback. If you can't manage the orders in time, they can lose their patience and leave the store frustrated. Each day you have more customers than the last, and if you get high enough satisfaction levels, you can get upgrades such as making drinks faster or having customers be more patient. It might sound like a very familiar concept because this is how a lot of cooking games work. So my own twist on it, other than being in VR, is each day somebody is banned from the shop. Within the chaos of trying to get everybody's drinks out of the way, you will also have to pay enough attention to not serve this person a regular drink and instead plant dynamite in place of a straw to blow them up. In most of my 24-hour video games, I use a plethora of free assets online to get the game together as soon as possible, but I actively wanted to avoid that this time around and put focus towards modeling and texturing as well, since I really love doing those things on top of programming. I was initially inspired by two things: those cute isometric kitchens that are commonly made in Blender, and playing this indie game called Bronzebeard Tavern with my friends. Overcooked also played as a big inspiration, but that was thought of after the fact. So I popped open everybody's favorite kitchen appliance and started modeling the characters that would be ordering the drinks, which were heavily inspired from the Overcooked design, as it was relatively simple and the floating hands will make for easy animation. On top of being easy to animate, they would match the cute and cozy aesthetic, and I thought they'd come out looking pretty cute. They didn't. They came out looking really freaking ugly. And to make my ugly son look really sad like this, shape keys came in super handy to quickly whip up a few different emotions. Now I can make him happy as well. Isn't that right, you ugly, ugly man? You wretched, ugly, disgusting, filthy, adding in hairstyles was next, but I wanted to come back to it since I'm no expert in 3D modeling and hairstyles have always been pretty intimidating to me. I needed the characters to have a randomized look, a la Sketchy Individual style, go watch that video, which would involve a random hairstyle, a random skin color, a random hair color, and a random shirt color. Since this would be generated in Engine, the trick is to export the model with completely white values and multiply different parts by different color values in Unreal, in which the different parts can be determined by assigning different vertex colors, which is separate from its texture. This way, I can use just one material for the entire character, which is important because since it's a VR game, I have to focus a bit more on keeping everything optimized, since VR standalone headsets like my Quest can't handle as many draw calls as a PC could. I was really excited to get to this next step of making the kitchen, starting with a basic blockout that I put together in Unreal Engine to get the sizing of everything. I grayboxed where each interactable item should go, exported the entire thing into Blender, and started rebuilding it there. Once I got the dimensions cleaned up, I started by adding more details like countertops and drawers, moving on to things like floorboards, and deciding to fill this remaining space with a sink so that when you play, we can pretend you'll actually wash your hands. You disgust me. Then, like the expert YouTuber that I am, I forgot to hit record when I added shelves, bricks, cupboards, a chalkboard, extra sink details, a dishwasher, shelves, and the first interactable item, the cup dispenser. The interactables also included the drink dispenser, which was originally going to be made with levers, kind of like a bar tap, but I decided instead to make them big juicy buttons because I realized that would probably be a lot easier to program the physics of. Next was this nice big toppings container to hold the boba and the other toppings. I made a drink shaker with a slot that perfectly fits the cup and added a simple rig and an animation that plays for a few seconds before it spits the drink back out. After that, the last mechanic would be to add the straw or the dynamite, which I just made these little boxes for. Then it was time for the details. I started with making some potted plants, but I immediately blacked out and had flashbacks to making living for plants because I suddenly just wanted to make a ton of different plants and put them all over, but I ultimately decided I would have no time for that because it took me a while just to make the one. So I moved on to make some string lights by modeling a single bulb and using an array modifier made it follow a Bezier curve so I could quickly and easily add some lights to the shot. Lastly, any cozy scene feels complete without vines in it, so with using Blender's new-ish geometry nodes for the very first time and also using this lovely tutorial by Blenderbox, I could literally just draw them wherever I wanted with a pen.
Oh my god, it's the future!
This was also the first time I was going to attempt texturing directly in Blender. I usually take the next step to Substance Painter, as you can see in my other videos, but I wanted to dip my yummy little toes into a field I had less experience in. For the most part, it was just solid colors with a little bit of detailing for variety, such as this Musgrave texture trick for the wood, and a cloud noise and custom brush for the chalkboard, stuff like that. The only texture I didn't end up doing in Blender was the boba texture, and I brought that over to Substance Designer. Since things like patterns, I knew I was going to have an easier time bringing that into Substance Designer. And after a little too much work on that, it looks really great in Blender. But is it gonna look good in Unreal Engine? Yes. So that modeling took the entire first day, which was the first 12 hours of work, and a little bit into the second day, but I found myself super unmotivated throughout the day and was getting very little work done for honestly no reason at all. It was just one of those days. And because of this, it didn't end up being a 24-hour challenge like I originally intended, just because I took the day pretty slowly to recuperate and just decided to go full steam ahead on the next day. So I wanted the machine to pour your drink when you push the big red button, but in order to push it down realistically, the hands need to be physics-based.
Hi, one large milk tea, please.
Right away, sir. What?
Sir, my tea, please.
I'm trying. I don't know what's happening. I can't push the
Sir,
button.
I demand you serve me my large milk tea this instant, or I'll call the manager.
Wait! So I had to make the hands physics objects, which required using things like constraints to keep them in place, which took a lot of work and gave me a lot of issues, including turning one of my hands into a head crab from Half-Life. I actually couldn't fix this for quite a while, so if you look closely, I actually have two right hands for a lot of this project, but at least the physics work and the hands react to the environment, which definitely adds a lot to the feel. Combine that with pressing a big thonky button, adding a spout, and filling the cup, we've got our very first mechanic of the game checked off. Using very similar code to filling up the drink, I did the same thing with the toppings, the only difference being adding the ability to put the toppings in the spoon first and then transferring it to the drink. And don't tell me that's not the most delicious looking bite of food you've ever seen in your life. If this existed in real life, I'd be caught shoveling spoonfuls of boba into my mouth. I'd get fired instantly. But seriously, scooping is actually kind of fun. I like doing it. Shaking the drink was easy. I just had to snap the drink to the shaker and play the animation that I made earlier. Once it's done, it kind of just shoots the drink out in a random direction because the collisions are overlapping, which is not something I intended, but also something I never ended up fixing. So there is a possibility it could just shoot itself directly into the wrong customer. And also shaking it adds the cap, which allows for the straw to be added. And you've probably noticed by this point when I grab things, they look terrible. Like they look buns. And it feels terrible too because the physics of the hand and the physics of the grab object are just kind of pushing each other away, and that's why it looks terrible. So I went back into Blender and I added a bunch of grab poses for all the items, so grabbing them looks and feels a ton better. So finally, after all that work, I can go through the entire process and make an entire drink properly and easily. So order up for... Great, I forgot to add customers. Now the player has to shut down their business. Thanks a lot, guys. I spawned X amount of customers over time per day and made sure that at least one was the band person each time. So I went to Affinity Photo and mocked up a band poster. Drew the dude in the center and made it very clear what you're supposed to do if you see them. For the character in the center, I once again had to draw him completely white and use the exact same trick I did for the models to color them in engine at runtime to make sure they match the band person exactly. And it works. To have them order, they give you a little order card so I wouldn't have to worry about any type of UI or characters having voice lines or having the player memorize orders, etc. I designed it like a chart so it's easy to digest immediately, and when you receive the cards, if you let go of them, instead of being physics-based and just falling like everything else, they interpolate to the spot in front of the ordering customer so you can't lose them or forget whose card is who. This actually works so well, I added the same thing to the topping scooper because if you threw that out the window, then the game would just kind of be over, you'd be screwed. Hey, can anyone grab that for me? But things like that can very easily be overlooked, which is why, like I said before, I always try to extensively plan out what the game plan is going to be before starting on these very quick fire projects. My weapon of choice for that is very often Milanote, which you can see is true even all the way back to my very first YouTube video, before I was comfortable talking into a microphone. Tyler and I got into Milanote to organize the project, which was incredibly useful. And no, the video is not sponsored by Milanote, but I mean,
Hey, Milanote, I got an email. You've got fingers and a keyboard. Let's make this happen.
Ew, get out of here, old Shawcat. Begging for a sponsorship. So cringe, am I right, fellas? Anyway, hold on, I lost where I was on my script. Oh yeah. This video is sponsored by Milanote. Milanote is a tool for organizing your creative projects. It's an online canvas to help you plan, brainstorm, and collaborate on ideas. And I've been using Milanote for many of my projects, including the entire layout of this VR game. It's perfect for creatives because I can organize all my ideas and plan out visually, which makes way more sense to me because I never learned how to read. And you might retaliate, Shawcat, if you never learned how to read, how are you reading this Milanote sponsorship script right now? That has a very clear explanation. Let me show you how I like to organize my board. I have things separated into 4 categories. I first bring together concepts where I can brainstorm the main game loop and bring together a mood board of visual references that are always there to come back to. Then I have the design column, which contains notes, colors, sketches, and documents on how I want each main part of the game to feel and look. I also like to add a board that I call the whiteboard that's just for jotting down quick sketches to lay my thoughts out on the page. But I spend most of my time inside of the gameplay section, where I have a task list that I organize into columns based on its completion and color-code its categories so it's easier for me to read at a glance. Since I'm in this task board so often, I can even link a document from my YouTube section, which is my 4th section, so I can take video notes without having to go back and switch boards back and forth. Milanote makes starting a new project really easy, with over 100 built-in templates available for all types of projects, so if you're a professional or just a hobbyist, or if you're really gonna start that podcast for real this time, you can always adapt Milanote to your needs. And most importantly, Milanote is available for free with no time limit, and I can seriously vouch for their free plan. It's legitimately banging. I used it for a very, very, very long time. So sign up for a free Milanote account using the link in the description.
There are 26 letters in the alphabet. There are...
So back to what we were working on in the game. Next up, the customers have to have this factor of impatience, which I made sure to wait until after the sponsored segment to give them so that they wouldn't skip it. Like you guys did. I made a quick progress bar that appears above their heads, and when it runs out, they storm off, leaving you with a satisfaction score of 0 for that customer. So the main game loop was actually almost done by now. You could go through the entire day quite smoothly, but one thing that was irking me the entire time was that throwing items absolutely sucked. Things never got thrown accurately how you wanted them to, often instead just going straight down, which is a common problem in VR that I've learned about now. So in doing some research on VR throwing, I ended up copying the technique that they use in Half-Life Alyx, which averages out all the recent past velocities of the item that you're holding when you throw, instead of just using the last one, which totally gave me a much better average result to throwing items. Lastly, I went back into Blender and animated the characters walking so I could have them walk up to the stand instead of appear and disappear. Also, I totally forgot to write this part in my script, but I filled in the rest of the environment with a free asset pack that I found on the marketplace, just so, you know, they wouldn't be ordering in a white void. The average satisfaction score is shown to you at the end of the day, and if it's high enough, you can get certain upgrades like increasing customer patience, shaking drinks faster, pouring drinks faster, etc. Which was actually super easy to program because all it really is tweaking a variable or two. After incrementing the day and increasing the amount of customers each day, there was really only one thing left to do. I got an explosion asset that I found online, made one more animation for the customers reacting to the explosion, and taught those ugly band people a lesson. And so, old Shawcat never was able to give the customers hairstyles. Maybe he forgot. Maybe he felt like the whole project was taking too much time. But he most likely died from the blast when he exploded a civilian just a couple feet away from his own face. And that's the famous story on how we got the game, Boba for Baldies.
I love you, Grandpa. Can you read it again tomorrow?
No. If you want to play Boba for Baldies, it's available for free on itch.io. I kind of stopped keeping track of how long the game ended up taking me after kind of giving myself a mental health break on the second day, but it was over the course of probably about 3 to 4 days, and I'm really happy with how it came out. And I'm not usually one to get on my hands and knees and beg for likes and subscribes, but I did spend $10 on that explosion asset, so if you want to support me or keep up with my upcoming title, Wicker Devil, you can subscribe or wishlist it on Steam. Hope you guys enjoyed the game, and I'll see you next time, and love you guys, and you know, thanks for watching, you know. Okay, bye!